we're very happy to welcome a couple of visitors from Victoria to the club tonight. So we've got Ian Jackson and Chris Chapman. Ian's call sign is VK3BUF and Chris's VK3QB, as it says up there. So Ian and Chris are on a bit of a road tour around, well, they're in VK2 this week, I think. You going to Queensland?
Not this week.
Not this week, not this time.
My wife wants her car back.
Okay. So, guys, Chris and Ian and Chris are going to talk to us about the Radio Amateur Society of Australia. What did you say? RASA?
RASA is as good as any.
RASA. And a new tool that they've developed around dealing with QRM. So I think a lot of us have heard about RASA. And so this is an opportunity for us to learn a bit more and to understand how it fits into the general amateur radio scene in Australia. So guys, very welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Mike. First, thanks for inviting us along. It's really good. As I've been saying to some of the others, you don't really get to know what's going on in radio clubs around the country unless you go there and see people and talk to them, and it's very much a two-way street. As was introduced, I'm Ian, VK3BUF. I've been an operator since my early teens, well, about 16, and been busy on the local club scene in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne for most of that time. And Chris, VK3QB.
Also active since about 1983, high school. Year 10, a science teacher asked me to write a logging program for the RD contest and then invited me to come along and log for him, and I was intrigued with the lights and the buttons on FT101E, and 3 months later got my licence, and as they say, the rest is history. And thanks for having us here.
As we go along, we'll both be talking in different parts, hopefully not at the same time.
Do our best.
Do our best, and if you have any questions, you can ask them as we go along. We'll have a little bit of Q&A at the end, so if it's topical, certainly pop up and ask a question, but we'll try and get through all the material that we have here in about an hour. One of the things that we're going to have to look at as amateurs is what's happening to amateur radio in years to come. None of us are getting any younger, and there's some new amateurs entering the hobby, not as many as we'd like. I guess I'm also interested in some feedback from the room. What you see is the biggest challenges for amateur radio over the next few years. Are there any thoughts on what you find is difficult, or what you think will become difficult for people entering the hobby? Any thoughts?
Well, I think the new licensing fees might be a deterrent to younger people.
Yep.
Depending on how much they price on that.
That's a consideration. That's something we'll speak on a bit later on too. I think there's a good case for concessions on that.
It's not getting easy to build stuff as the component gets more and more.
Yes, but that's our eyes, everything getting a bit fuzzier.
No, but it's also the fact that a lot of the discrete components are just disappearing.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the fast transistors are disappearing. They're just not making them anymore.
I think the biggest challenge is demographics.
Yeah.
In the sense that a lot of radio amateurs, many of us got in when we were at school or soon after, and we're all getting old and falling off our perch. And I think the biggest challenge is how to attract younger people and how to use all this new electronic software, all these gadgets and things that are available, how to hook them into a hobby. And to sort of regenerate the clubs with younger people.
So tonight we'll talk about some of those challenges. We want to talk about RASA as an organisation, who we are and what the priorities of the organisation are. We'll touch on the big changes that have happened this year to examinations and licensing, as much as we know. The process of dealing with interference is a big part of what we're doing. There's some changes to the HF band plan, which we will tell you about. You may already be aware of them, but they affect the VK operations. Some work that's happening via RASA on contesting call signs. But okay, on the nature of challenges for amateur radio, I'll put up a couple of dot points here, and I dropped these ones in this afternoon. So the first one is the magic of the hobby. that's a little message that's getting a little bit harder to sell, because when we started out, perhaps a long time ago for many of us as amateur radio, it was you could do things that were not otherwise possible. There was no portable operation that was going to get you from one side of the planet to the other very easily, and the magic of amateur radio was very real. And Jamboree on the air, you would see the kids, their faces light up and say, wow, this is really impressive, you can talk to people on the other side of the planet. And now, with these mobile phones, they've taken away a lot of the perceived magic of the hobby, and that, why do I need to have amateur radio when I can talk to anyone I like whenever I want to? We know that it's different, but this sort of technology undermines some of what we say are the most important aspects. For me, the training, the education and knowledge behind the hobby is the most important aspect. It's a little bit hard to see. So when people join the hobby is another aspect. When I grew up, the majority of guys were just going through high school, perhaps leaving at high school and getting a trade, then they start to generate some income and have a bit of time on their hands, and amateur radio suddenly becomes attractive, particularly if you're a little bit nerdy, you have a few aspirations with working with technology. There's a window where you can muck around with this stuff. And I did, and I just kept going. What we're finding now is those who have those kind of aspirations immediately want to go into tertiary education, so they go through high school, do all of the studies, get into university, keeps them pretty busy and reasonably broke, and by the time they get through that process, there are other motivations, the need for finding work, maybe even starting families by then. So we lose access to a lot of the guys who used to enter the hobby at that level. That can still happen, but it just doesn't happen as much. When we've got a look at the challenges of getting people to learn the knowledge of amateur radio. Clubs, I believe you are running some theory sessions, some education classes, which is really good. You've got to be able to do this, and this is something that the clubs do better than anyone else. You've got to be able to bring the knowledge and the people together so that they can get through the exams. And it's hard to do it online. There are programs for it, but yeah, getting the information out for our very specific hobby is important. Access to exam services is another challenge, because if you don't have frequent exam sessions in lots of different places around the country that are accessible, then nobody's going to enter the hobby. You don't put obstructions in front of people by not having enough examination services. So that's another key challenge. Representation. This is a bit of a tricky one. The interaction between amateur radio and the ACMA has shifted in the last 10-20 years. The core of knowledge in the ACMA, the technical knowledge, has fallen, as in the number of those who are familiar with amateur radio operations, the number of amateurs who are in the ACMA has fallen, and when we go to them and we want band privileges or we want to talk about licensing and these sorts of things, first of all we've got to try and encounter somebody who knows what the hell we're talking about. And how we present ourselves as amateurs to the ACMA is becoming very important. Quite often they're relying on us to drive the message because they don't really understand the amateur radio side of things. And that's going to continue to be a challenge in an organisation like the ACMA, which has a lot of legal staff and professionals who have just not had the contact with amateur radio. Antenna permissions, difficulties in and the rise of interference. That's two items there, really. So a lot of people are moving into smaller blocks, rental places, and this is reducing the ability to put up big antennas. So there's going to be shifts in how people are operating, the influx of remote stations and the likes of FT8 to work under high noise environments. We're going to talk a little bit about interference tonight. But that's another challenge. We've got more and more appliances that are surrounding us and basically swamping out our HF band, and that's a hard thing to deal with. So RASA was formed in 2018, just over a year ago, by 5 amateurs. We're spread over 4 states. Back in 2017, we felt that we needed to do more work to represent amateurs to the ACMA. That there's as I was referring to before, they need to understand what we're doing. We have to keep on top of our privileges, and we felt that this could be done better, and that was the motivation. So we created this fresh approach. We're an internet-based organisation. That is, when we record our members, we just take a call sign, a name and an email address. That's it. And we send out bulletins every couple of weeks to every one of those members. And that has allowed us, the internet has allowed us to reach everyone around the country. We don't have a single location meeting hall or anything like that. It's a very low overhead organisation, and that's allowed us to get by. So as an organisation, we're an incorporated association in the state of Victoria, like a club might be, but as soon as that was organised, that same registration was shifted to ATSIC as a nationally incorporated body. So we are a legal entity in every state of Australia. That's the process that you use if you don't want to go down the path of a public company. So we've built some safeguards into the operation of the management team, like limited tenure, so that over time it ensures that there will be a change of management in our organisation, and that keeps things a bit fresh, introduces more ideas. We made free membership for the first year, and this was a conscious decision by our team. We basically funded the organisation ourselves for that first year and got it all going, and wanted to see people get involved. It has to work two ways. We need to have members who are interested in communicating with us, and that then allows us to represent them when we're talking to the ACMA. You cannot have one without the other. So in just on a year of operation, we've got well over 500 members, and that's steadily rising. So the ACMA has looked at us. We've had meetings with them on several occasions, and there's regular contact with them, and they've been very encouraged by the work that we're doing, and I think we have a good working relationship. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure.
So our primary objectives, we want to facilitate emerging technologies and communications. That's something that's always going to be changing. We're always seeing new digital modes coming out, and this is something we want to help spread the word on so that we don't have conflicts of interest on band plans and things like this. Sometimes it takes some coordination. We want to follow the... Oh, hang on.
Sorry. There you go. You're back where you are.
Where there's new technology being prepared, we want to follow that once again. There's a lot of very competent engineers in the hobby and around the world, and we can provide another window into what's happening. We want to help to educate the next generation of amateurs. This is not something we can do directly, but we want to be able to make it easier for clubs to deal with people who want to enter the hobby, because the clubs really are the engine that drives amateur radio in Australia. And of course, we want to be able to lobby the regulator to enhance our privileges as necessary. So the five of us in the management team is Glenn Dunstan, VK4DU, he's our president. He's in Brisbane. Alan Meredith, VK2CA, closer to your own turf here. And we're hoping to catch up with Alan tomorrow. Chris, as our treasurer, Andrew Smith, VK6AS, you may have heard of, and myself. So between us, we have had a lot of involvement in professional work, in electronics, in radio and communications, in the club scene, and collectively that's given us a lot of ability to set this organisation up and to make it work. So our priorities for the remainder of this year and for next year, we want to promote the improvements in the examination process, and we're seeing after the AMC, the Maritime College has taken over this service, we're seeing a steady increase in improvements in service, and we want to be able to help to relay that information to the amateurs at large. And we want to be able to lobby them because they are a very separate organisation, but we want to be able to lobby them when it's important to make changes. You spoke before about having better pricing for people entering the hobby. Well, one of the things that we're pushing for is for them to provide some discount services for concession card holders and students. And I feel that's an important thing that should happen, and we'll keep pressing that point. There's a syllabus review process coming up. This is a complicated issue. Essentially, the syllabus that drives the whole examination service is up for renewal. This is something that was inevitable. The ACMA hosts this by getting the successful tenderer to create a committee, and they select people who are going to be from amateurs from around the country who are going to be discussing what will make up the next syllabus. We don't know who these people are. I don't know when this session is going to take place. It's likely to take place, I'm speculating, over the next year, something in that order. But when it happens, we want to be able to collect information from amateurs and to actually have a little bit of input into that committee and shape the syllabus for something that amateurs are going to be comfortable with. The 60-metre band. Did you want to touch on this one?
Just, I think it was either yesterday or the day before, we put the submission into the 5-year Spectrum Outlook, and that included a proposal on how we'd implement access to the 60-metre band. I won't go into the detail of that here, but that's up on our website. If you want to have a look at that, that's available to have a read of, and certainly send us any comments, but that went into ACMA, so it was either yesterday or the day before.
And power limits, that's something that has been kicked around for some time, and it's still a topic of discussion. There's been some work done on a document looking at the health effects of RF, and this is being examined because it affects our ability to apply for higher power levels, because if they feel that it's unsafe, that we're not going to get it. And we're saying otherwise, that there are very few issues around the world where people have operated in higher power, and we want a piece of that action in Australia too, for those who are in a position to use it properly.
One of the interesting observations is you can go and get a high power permit for 70 centimetres to do EME work. Now, if you're running high power on 70 centimetres, there's much more risk to health and life than running high power on the low bands. But we don't have that ability for HF. The same goes for 6 metres. You can attempt to go through the process to get a high power permit for 6 metres, and equally so, anyone that's about 1.5 metres tall, as it turns out, is a quarter wavelength. So you need to be very, very careful around where you or others might be exposed around high gain antennas if you're doing EME stuff on 6 metres as well.
6 metres is very strange inside a pine forest.
Yeah.
Because the trees are 6 metres apart.
Yeah. The same applies, or the same should apply to HF. And we're quite fortunate in that we've got a doctor on our committee, Andrew Smith, and he's been doing a lot of research globally into the potential impacts of HF on the human body, and the risk or otherwise for a proposal to put to ACMA in that regard. So hopefully there'll be more about that in the coming weeks and months.
On digital modes, how many foundation members operators are there in your club? Do you have? Yeah.
No, we have a few.
We have a few.
They don't all regularly turn up.
Yeah. I asked that because it varies from club to club. We've seen a big influx of foundation members in some clubs, and some are established and they don't have a lot of them. But it has become a bit of a problem because a lot of the established clubs say, well, we want to have a digital repeater, a DMR or a D-Star or something like that, and the foundation operators of that club can't join in. And that's a little bit of a problem because often a club that has a repeater, that becomes a central meeting place for the members of that club. And when foundation licenses were conceived, there wasn't the same influx of audio over digital that there is now. And the thinking was, okay, that's packet radio, it's radio teletype, it's other.
Advanced hobbyists.
That's it. It's dedicated and very specific. So foundation licenses were left out, but that's kind of left them in the cold. And it becomes a little bit odd because, okay, you can have a repeater that can be in analog mode or digital mode. In the analog mode, you're talking to a microphone, your voice comes out the other end. If you enter it into the digital mode, the same thing happens, but it's illegal for foundation operators to do that. So that's something that, over time, we still have to fix. And that's going to come out of that syllabus review panel, I imagine, and we will be pressing for. And one of our priorities, which is already underway, is to develop resources for amateurs to help deal with noise hopefully on how to deal with them themselves. And if you do have to inspire utility companies and the authorities to help deal with issues, well, we've got some tools that will assist in that process. There's no magic bullet, but there's processes that do work. So on exam services, we know that the WIA did have the exam services up until the 1st of February of this year. That was the end of the contract that was scheduled. Last October, the ACMA put out their tender, and the two major contenders were the WIA themselves and the Maritime College, which operates under the University of Tasmania. They went through their process. The AMC won the contract. They'd had a solid track record in maritime licences. For many years, they had a good relationship with the ACMA, and they had a network of around the country that was already in place. That must have impressed them enough to win the contract, and that's what they're doing.
So can I just, the call sign services that
Yes.
was previously through WIA, is that now through the Maritime College?
Yes, it is.
Okay, didn't know that.
Yeah.
Didn't realise
That is being incrementally progressed. When they first took it over, it was new call signs straight off the list. They had not yet released access to two-letter call signs for people who want to take them over. This is, I believe, going to happen.
That's probably all we really know.
That's about all we really know, yeah.
The other thing is, and you might know the answer to this, ACMA wanted to bring it under the RTO, the training stuff and the exam under the Registered Training Organisation
Yeah.
umbrella.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's that mean and why they're doing it? I know what RTO is, but why they're doing it?
Look, I don't think that it's probably fair to say that everyone in this room probably thinks the concept of an RTO is overkill for amateur exams. Probably rightly or wrongly, and it probably doesn't matter. The ACMA had a list of criteria, and one of those were a preference for an RTO. As AMC sits under the University of Tasmania, they are an RTO, so it would be fair to assume that there was a good solid tick in the box for that requirement. Other than that, it is what it is.
They have, when they took over the exam processes, they had a fairly small window to activate, but that has been done. They're now conducting regular exams, special exams, and exams in a remote area on areas on application. So that's something that they picked up on. They developed the question bank so that they can conduct these exams. They kicked off, within 1 month of the start date that they accepted the contract. Nothing could happen until that contract had been signed, which took place. There was that, I think, 1 month delay while they got the act together, and they're operational.
Yep.
So, they part of the tender process was that they needed advisors. This was always seen by the ACMA as an essential part because, the Maritime College do specialise in maritime work. They had to get the services of a couple of advisors who knew amateur radio, the various aspects of it. And in this role, Glenn Dunstan and Andrew Smith were accepted as advisors, and they had been working with them as over the last 6 months or so, I guess. I don't know. They are doing it in an independent capacity to RASA. A lot of the time when they're dealing with the AMC, we have no contact with that process. But they were seen as competent operators in those fields, and they have assisted that process. Since that time, other advisors have become involved. I don't know who they are. That's something that the AMC have got going. Assessors, a couple of improvements here that have immediately took place is that the assessments no longer require two persons. They can be single person assessments. And this was a big change because we know that certainly on the fringes of the capitals, it was really hard getting a couple of operators in at the same place at the same time to conduct an exam. And so that's freed things up. They are no longer required to be a member of any organisation. Previously they had to be an assessor, you had to be a WIA member. That requirement was dropped. The amount of red tape involved in an exam event has reduced. They've fine-tuned a lot of these processes themselves over the years, and they felt that they didn't need to be as difficult as they were, and yet they still maintain the those high standards. So we're going to continue to watch what they're doing, where they release information that's available for the general Ammeter population. We'll be passing that on through our bulletins just to keep people in touch with what's going on. We'll be lobbying them, as we said, on concessions and students, and we hope to get involved with the syllabus review when it happens. So that's as far as I wanted to take the introduction to RASA itself, but the next important aspect of it is the work that we're doing with interference. And
So can we just ask you some questions?
Sure.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I suppose for me the big question is how, with RASA coming along, how do you see yourselves in relation to the WIA? Because, it seems you're both approaching ACMA, and is the Ammeter community big enough for two organisations? It's a bit of the elephant in the room, this question.
Yeah.
How do you see it?
That's a reasonable question. I don't see that as a problem. I see that as a good thing. I see it as a healthy thing. The WIA has a membership base, that's fine. And if people are members of the WIA and getting what they want out of the organisation, that's also fine. Some of those people have decided to join RASA as well. Some are not in either. It's entirely on what people want to do. As far as the ACMA is concerned, they are quite happy to talk to more than one representative body. This is not unusual. They talk to lots of representative bodies in lots of different fields, and they have indicated they have no issue in engaging us in conversation on topics of Ammeter radio.
And look, it's probably fair to say, and we had this discussion last night at Illawarra, and we're amongst friends. A number of us, as you know, have been on the board of the WIA over the years, and I think most of us at some point or another have volunteered for the WIA, and I think most of us have been members of the WIA. And as in any organisation, whether it's your own club or any national organisation, sometimes change is needed. And as we all saw, I think it was either 2 or 3 years ago, there was a large wholesale change in the board of the WIA, and that brought about some changes. Many of them were very positive. There were some people who felt that there were some elements of representation that could be done differently and better. And sometimes change can be more effective when it's done outside. And we understand very much that there will always be some people that don't like that or don't accept that. To date, we've found that by being very transparent and factual with what we're doing and why we're doing it is broadly getting a very positive response. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that as we move through the next section.
Okay, but sorry, another question. So do you see yourselves being able to offer some of the things that WIA offers? For example, the insurance, the pooled insurance.
No.
No. So you're not in that game.
No QSL bureau.
No QSL.
No magazine.
Yeah.
No insurance.
No insurance. Okay.
So we are very much VK oriented. That's our area.
No international representation. So we're not trying to be. We're not going to pretend we're something we're not.
So you won't go to WARC then? You say no international representation.
No.
So you won't participate in WARC.
And ARU forums, all that.
Beg your pardon?
International Amateur Radio Union, that stuff.
No. We can talk a little bit about that as we move through later in the presentation.
No, that's just useful, just to understand where you
And look, I think there's a lot of things where we've been able to leverage off joint aspirations, if you like, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, but like the updated band plan, those are things where we've been able to collaborate very well, and hopefully we can collaborate on other things in the future, and we can talk about some of that as we go through the next section. Any other questions? Or
Before we move off, talking about the Australian Maritime College and exams, how long does one normally have to wait for a call sign nowadays?
I'd refer you to their website.
No, the reason I'm asking is I know one person that has done an exam under the new regime.
Yep.
That exam was all fine, but he's been waiting for over a month now for a call sign, which seems a bit extraordinary.
I'd be ringing up. I mean, we've heard some anecdotal evidence of people getting their call sign 10 days after.
But it's still very early days. I must be getting it.
Yeah. It does seem very long though, Tim, for sure. I'd be following that one up.
Yeah, okay.
You know, Dean that was a member here, he got his course done in 2 or 3 days because he had to leave the country.
Yeah,
But
the country did
he did pull strings and make it, send emails and stuff like that. Back in the days when I got my ticket, it didn't matter what strings you pulled, you still waited.
I mean, look, I think it'd be fair to say, as with any organisation transitioning a set of services, there are always going to be some bumps as you're taking up those services.
Yeah.
You know, and I think...
Yeah, okay, look, I understand. You're not the AMC, I understand.
And the thing is, the ACMA couldn't announce the tender result until they announced the tender result.
That's right.
And at that point, the changeover was immediate. What they really should have done was announce that 2 months from now it's going to change over.
There should have been a transition.
Give people some transition time, but they announced, okay,
Yeah.
well, it's changing today.
Yeah.
All right, it's a bit of a dumb way to announce it.
I can't argue with that logic.
No.
It would have been nice to have seen a better changeover. I think it felt a little bit rushed towards the end, didn't it?
Yeah.
But that's not something we had control over.
That's why it's turmoil anyway.
I think as observers, you know, we'd have to say the same thing.
Are any of your objectives different to WIA? Is there anything to delineate a difference between you and what the WIA does?
Just go back to our... Did we have the primary objectives? Promote amateur radio and its role in facilitating emerging communication technologies, evidence-based research, educate and encourage and lobby the regulator. I'd say that there's, on a Venn diagram, about 90% overlap there.
Doesn't say tubes there, does it? Right? Doesn't say tubes there, does it?
But to be fair, I think your objectives are quite focused on a specific set of things. You know,
I think
you feel more, I don't know, the objectives are greater than the WIA?
Well, I think we're going in fresh directions.
Right.
That we can see that there are things that needed to be done that we felt there should be a bigger emphasis on, and there are areas that we're
Obviously,
focusing.
that's why you set this up.
Yeah.
That's right. Us being here is part of that. Us helping amateurs to deal with interference issues across the country is a part of that. That had been underdone. And I want to see more interaction with clubs in general and use the club resources across Australia to pull in the same direction.
I find you doing more with the ACMA than the WIA.
Don't know.
WIA, you don't know.
No, I don't know the answer to that, but
I mean, the only other observation I'd make, and you know, this is not a criticism, it is what it is. Smaller organisations can be more nimble and dynamic. We've got a management team of 5, we exist in the internet. We don't have any of the encumbrances wrapped around us. And that's just the nature of the beast. But shall we move on?
I was going to say the other side of interference is abuse of the bands.
Sorry?
Abuse of the bands.
Yeah.
You know,
Specifically?
people, unlicensed people transmitting F calls with 100 watt PAs and plus, you know, this sort of thing. But, do you think the organisation has any role in assisting ACMA with that, tracking that down? I mean, enforcement is something ACMA doesn't really do.
Enforcement is not the role of representative bodies. Enforcement is the role of the regulator. And
The regulator needs a bit of a push sometimes.
the regulator does need a bit of a push sometimes. And again, we can talk about that a little bit as we move through.
Yeah.
okay.
Shall we move on? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, good. Right. One of the things we did when we kicked the organisation off was we did some surveys and we talked to a lot of amateurs and we said, you know, what are the top 3, 4, 5 things that you feel are impacting the hobby and you'd like to see improvements around? And pretty much everyone I know that's on HF said the noise floor.
Yep, exactly.
The noise
in
floor.
the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly in the city, and certainly in rural areas where you've got electric fences, you know, farmyard machinery. I live around dairy farms, I'm pretty fortunate, but there's all sorts of electrical interference these days, and it's not getting any better.
Yeah.
We looked at what was out there, and there was a bit of a void. There's certainly some very good textbooks, you know, the ARRL RFI handbook. There's another book I've got floating around here somewhere from RSGB. But there was nothing to really help people to kick the ball into play. If you're an F-call, if you're not particularly technical, where do I start? How do I find what the noise is? Once I've found it, what do I do about it? And these were things that were resonating when we were talking to people and when we were doing surveys. It's something we felt that as amateurs we were very, very poorly represented. Those of you that are on Facebook will have seen people putting up their letters they've sent to the ACMA about their high noise level, and the response is, it's your fault because you have a sensitive receiver. There's also anecdotal stories of people phoning the ACMA to say, my neighbour's pool pump, LED lights, whatever it might be, is wiping out HF.
Yep.
Send around your RI to fix it up. And we know from talking to RIs, ACMA neither has the resources nor the capability to respond to that sort of engagement. So one of the things we said was, well, look, this is important. What can we do about it? Let's look at it. Is this mouse going to work?
Just use the wheel a bit backwards and forwards, and it should wake it up.
Okay. Right. We've got a few little videos here. We'll just cut to them from time to time. This is something any of you anywhere near a noisy power line will relate to. That's from Alan VK2CA, those of you that know Alan. Pretty much all over HF. S7 to S9 noise, all the time. Ruining the hobby for him. Thanks. You're going to close that window? I'll do that.
Yep.
Yeah. And back to the present.
Yeah.
So that's just an example, and I'm assuming most of you will have had something like that going
absolutely.
on. So what experiences have we all had? I've had electric fences, well, noise blankets take care of that. Some people have got plasma tallies, LED lights in the house, LED lights next door, automatic garage door openers, hot water regulators, the list of items goes on.
Yeah, the problem is you just don't know, do you? Just turn
And
the
half
radio
the time
on,
you don't
get
know.
that rubbish, you got no idea what it is.
That's right.
Just, yeah.
So you turn the radio off and you think, oh, next time I'm portable, I'll have a go.
So just an interesting question for the room. How many gents here have solar power systems on their homes?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, about a third, nearly.
Come back to that and get a
Yeah.
take. Yeah. And the other thing that's really, really clear is ACMA is not going to proactively help us on this. I think anyone that's tried will know that. We've spoken to them and confirmed it. There is no golden bullet. We spoke with a couple of RIs when we were putting this together, and it was quite funny. One of them said, for crying out loud, you guys are technicians. You've been at the forefront of electronics and radio communications for many, many years, yet every time there's the slightest complaint, you come running to us to solve your problems. Why don't you do something to help yourselves before you come to us? So all of that sort of...
Shoot the neighbour.
Go around, turn the neighbour's power switch
Turn
on.
the neighbour's power switch off. So it's not a golden bullet, it's a different sort of bullet. So what we did was we sort of sat down as a group and we said, how could something look that would be useful, people could use, but more importantly they could also contribute to and the clubs could get involved. Because as Ian said, we're really, really strong proponents of grassroots amateur radio being in with the clubs. So that when new people come into the hobby, they get support from the clubs and vice versa. So we sort of, excuse the kitschy name, but we had to call it something, QRM.Guru. We decided to build a web-based tool to help people dealing with interference. Why did we go with, I've just got a couple of notes here, I didn't want to overlook anything. Why did we go with, a knowledge base? A knowledge base, I'm assuming most people are familiar with a knowledge base system. Typically when you phone a help desk, the operator will be using a knowledge base system to help find answers to your problems. And online, if you've been to any knowledge bases, you'll be familiar with them. You type in your question and it will try to find the best answer that suits your question. So we felt a knowledge base would be best, as it's a great way to collect data, documents, evidence, all sorts of artefacts, store it, organise it, and represent it back to the user, as opposed to a straight website. The other great thing with the knowledge base is that it's scalable and you can constantly add to it. And that was one of the things we had as a vision. We'd build the platform, we'd start to populate it, we'd take it out to the amateur community and we'd say, guys, grab a hold of this please and use it and contribute to it, so that we're helping ourselves in effect. And as I've said a number of times already, I'll keep going through this. We want to encourage the clubs to pick up QRM.Guru and help your members who have got noise problems. Document the experience. So document the noise as you see it. Document the process of identifying the noise. Document the process of resolving the noise. Send us that experience and we'll add it to QRM.Guru. And that way the next person that comes along and says, I've got a noise, where do I start? It may well be that your experience fits the bill for them. So we're building up this knowledge base, this database of experiences. So let's take a quick look at QRM.Guru, live demonstrations. Hopefully we won't have any gremlins.
That's the home page, is it?
It is the home page.
Excellent.
Right, we haven't endeavoured to make it anything more than it is. We wanted to stick to the knitting, if you like. I'll move over here. Am I still in the view?
No, you can have you.
Yep. It's a very straightforward knowledge-based structure. Menus up here, asking a question here, and categories down here. Every document or post gets put into a category. It could be put into multiple categories, and we'll look at some examples of these. I'll just go through this very quickly. Over here on this side, we have two sections, trending and latest. So trending are posts or documents that are being looked at the most recently. So it's giving you an idea of what people are looking at the moment. And the latest are the latest documents or posts that have been added to QRM. So if you're coming back to have a quick look at this once or twice a month, what are the updates? You'll see the latest documents down there. Over here, we've tried to divide the categories up into something that makes sense. As I said, we're looking for the Ammeter community to contribute to this. So none of this is hardwired. We want it to grow and evolve. Basic diagnosis. Unsurprisingly, where you think you'd start. I've turned on 40 metres, I've got this bloody awful noise. Where do I start? Some information on consumer devices, some case studies, and this is one of the areas we want to see grow with case studies of videos and reports and feedbacks. One of the other areas that from my own experience I know dealing with neighbours is so important. It doesn't matter if you've got all the technical answers, you know what needs to be done. If you've got a terrible relationship with your neighbour, they're highly unlikely to cooperate with you in fixing the noise source. So there's some notes and some, if you like, some role plays and suggestions about how you might build good relationships with your neighbours and explain this bizarre hobby that we all enjoy.
Big gun.
Sorry?
Talking about my neighbour.
Yeah. Moving down, obviously a very big section, and a section that will grow, are posts and documents about how to locate the noise source. This is a to-be developed section on mobile noise, and we're fortunate to have Bob VK3XP, who had a career in automotive electronics, and he's got a lot of experience in dealing with automotive noise. So we'll be working with Bob over the coming months to put together a whole bunch of information on resolving automotive noise.
There's some knowledge of that in this club as well.
Ah, great, good.
It's a big topic. I mean, it's not just what interferes with cars, it's how, operators shutting down car electronics and causing issues. It's the interference the other way, of course.
Is there stuff above HF, or mostly focused on HF, or is there VHF, UHF as well?
Currently it's mostly focused on HF, but a lot of the theory and the process is just as applicable.
I was just thinking, if you wanted to pump things down on VHF, UHF, little TV dongles on a laptop,
Yeah.
you can build your own antenna.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something which we'll touch on.
We'll touch on.
And then to do a how-to like that would be a useful thing.
Yeah.
We've got some how-to stuff here.
Yep, we'll come to that. Obviously noise reduction in your shack, tidying up your own house first, cleaning up your own laundry. So there's some information there on how to reduce noise in your shack, on what things to look for. Power line noise, surprisingly that does seem to be quite a large problem. And when we were at EMDRC 2 weeks ago, there was a lot of discussion on power line noise. And one of the guys who lives in the bush, a very well-known amateur, raised the issue that the 2009 bushfires were almost certainly a direct result of arcing on power lines, igniting those bushfires. And his view, quite rightly, was that power line noise would be the canary in the coal mine. And the possibility perhaps of radio amateurs as a service back to the community, going out to identify these noisy power poles and lines out in highly wooded areas, and bringing that to the attention of the power distributors. So that's something that we've sort of popped on the list of things to consider. And of course the other one is where there's power line noise, there's also dollars being lost. So
yeah, we've done a little bit on power line noise tracking, some strategies for that, because it tends to go up and down the lines a bit and it's hard to identify the actual source, but there are some strategies which can take you right to the pole that's causing the noise. And there's some videos which describe that as well as text documents on this site.
So they don't seem to be actually care until it explodes on top of the pole.
That's right.
yeah, well that's the normal maintenance cycle. Yes.
Yes, to a degree. If you just casually ring up a power authority and say, I've got some noise, then they really don't want to deal with you. However, if you're systematic in your approach and you record what you're doing, you record the sounds, probable locations, put it to them in writing, they kind of have to respond, and if they don't, we've got each state's got an ombudsman that can lean on to make sure that they respond. But in order to go down that process, you've got to provide an evidentiary path, and a bit of that is described on this website.
Yeah, so I've actually been down that path
Okay.
with our local Ausgrid.
What was your experience?
The power pole exploded in the end before they did anything.
Wow. Okay. So did you actually put some dynamite in it or anything like that?
No, I was
Transformer on the pole?
transformer on the pole,
Yeah.
it was arcing. Okay, I took photos of it and sent it to them.
Yep.
I recorded the noise it was generating. I recorded the RF noise it was generating. Okay, and in the end, I took photos of it exploding in the middle of the night.
Well, that's probably a telltale.
There you go.
Yeah, they replaced the pole.
I've done a little bit of running around with a thermal imaging camera on poles that have the prospects of creating noise, and you can see changes in power poles through thermal imaging, because if it's arcing, it's creating a signature which is higher than the ambient.
Well, this was arcing and smoke was coming out of it for weeks.
Well, that's a fair giveaway. It sounds more like a volcano.
Yeah.
Did you go to the ombudsman?
No,
No.
I didn't. But I did call them and I did speak to their technicians a number of times.
Yeah.
Right?
Smoking gun.
Yeah.
But also, we're talking about power line. It's difficult to determine whether it's actually a power line or whether it's an HFC problem. That's also adds to the complexity of it. Because we've got a member here, Chris is not here tonight, that had a problem, and he went through buggery with that.
Yeah.
In the end, he had to write a letter to the local minister, for the minister to write a ministerial to the ACMA to kick them up the arse before they actually came out and did anything.
These are all the sorts of anecdotal or documented stories we're looking for.
Yeah.
We want to bring them back, and we also want to look to see if there are any trends. Because obviously if you've got, by the sounds of it, in New South Wales, a real reluctance from the distribution companies to take action.
As I said, the problem is you don't know with the distribution. You know the problem's there. From my house to the shops, there's two where I go past two, areas that say probably 50 metres where the AM radio plotted out.
Yeah.
And the same at my sister's place. But you ring up the ACMA and so did Chris from the club. And they said, forget it, no, we're not going to do anything. No. You have to find 3 neighbours that'll all put a complaint in before we'll do anything. Yeah. And if you just drive by and get the interference, they say, we're not interested, just go away, we are not interested.
Both the formal feedback we've got and the anecdotal is that going to ACMA with these complaints will not yield a result.
Yeah.
What yields a result is getting poll numbers, getting recordings of the noise, both if you can audio, video.
Chris did that, the ACMA refused to turn up.
Take it to the power company. But the power company's creating the noise.
He didn't know it was a power company problem.
Right.
It ended up being an HFC problem, but it's on the same poles here, it's aerial.
Yeah. Yep.
So he knew he had a problem and he tracked it down, he DF'd, he knew exactly where it was, but until he wrote to the minister, and because there's a federal election coming up, the minister put his kicking boots on. that something was finally done. But that's just
Don't
unsatisfactory.
throw us into AM under the tram lines and sit in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Now we've got one
No,
here,
I mean, look, there's all of these, and as we say, none of this is necessarily a golden bullet, but certainly the feedback we have from the RIs is if you're coming to us with documented evidence, if you're coming to us with proof you've been to the power companies, distributors, or whoever it is that's creating the noise, it gives us a much greater likelihood to be able to engage our technical resources.
Yeah, so ACMA would do nothing about it. The only ones who would talk to me were actually the power supplier, right? And they would not take responsibility for the issue.
We had
caught fire.
we had a VK7 that sent us a testimonial about a similar situation. Power line noise in their town. It wasn't a big town. They went to the power company and they said, "Oh, no, we don't care. It's not our problem. We're not going to do anything unless the ACMA makes us." So he went to the ACMA. They said, "We're not interested." So you get these circular references. The ACMA just referred him back to the power company.
Yeah.
So then he went to the ombudsman. They said, "Okay, I can see you've been going backwards and forwards here. Now I'm going to force that power company to respond to your complaints." And they changed half the circuits in the town.
Yeah.
And they quietened it down. He got a result.
Look, we have 2 case studies where people have gone to the Ombudsman, one in VK7, one in VK2, and the Ombudsman has forced the power company to take action. Not saying it's going to work every time, everywhere, but there is a process that is more likely to succeed than no process at all.
Maybe we need an organisation with an ominous sounding name to send official looking letters, you know, like
There is that.
radio interference
Yeah,
enforcement agency or something,
that's right.
and just send letters to people.
Chris, sorry.
That's
On a personal level, I can see that my company name is listed a couple
Yes.
of times there.
Yeah.
So, like, I work for Philips. So, you know, what do you expect from, say a Philips or some other?
Can we
company?
come to that when Ian talks about the product reviews?
And it's a good thing.
Okay.
I don't have a product that produces RF interference.
We've got some information on regulations, a little bit of information on how to lodge complaints, compliance and labelling. There's a lot of misinformation around labelling and all the variants of labels that we see. I'll get Ian to come back and talk about the product reviews.
Foxtel high 4 boxes.
That's some of those.
Obviously the chestnut for many, solar power inverters and the noise they cause. One of the things we're wanting to do here, as well as those of you that have solar inverters, if you've had a good experience with us, please let us know what it is, model number, some photos, and if you've either got some images of a spectrum scope or something to illustrate it's not causing noise, fantastic. And equally so, if you've got bad experiences, let us know. All of this stuff would have to be prefaced with appropriate language, but people have said to us, wouldn't it be nice to go to a website that says these are solar inverters that people have had good experiences with and bad experiences with if you're a radio amateur. Now I know myself, I've got Fronius, quiet as a mouse right across the spectrum, and everyone I've spoken to that's got Fronius has the same experience. I'm aware of people that have some others and all they've got is horrible noise. They have to go and flick the switch to turn off the inverter so that they can use HF. So that's something we've got there. Techniques for resolving noise, we'll look at that, in particular the QRM kit. Templates and forms, these are all provided in their native forms, whether it's Excel or Word. We're not fixed to the way it's set up. If you want to modify those forms, go right ahead. And of course, less of an issue these days, causing interference to our neighbours, what with digital TV and the internet. It's not often that we're causing the old broadcast or TV interference to our neighbours anymore.
We touched on the forms before, but that becomes very important. You can make your inquiries and submit complaints, but if you can record what the sound sounds like, maybe you can find a direction from it, maybe you can't. But if you have a trail on a form, when I've experienced it, whether it's day or night, wet or dry, the events that surround that, put it in a form, then that gives them something to work with. They're much more likely to respond if you can give them something to work with.
And it also helps you understand and profile your noise. Is it something that starts up most days about 9 AM and stops somewhere around 6 PM? Well, that sort of tends to lead towards maybe a solar inverter or some sort of a device that's
Solar filter.
some sort of device that's associated with daytime operation? Or is it something that's coming on, as a mate of mine had, at sunset or just after, and it was switching off about 11 p.m. Turned out to be his neighbour's garden lights. Yeah. Or plasma TVs or whatever. So the idea here with these forms is they're a prompter to get you to record the noise and to start to profile it, almost a little bit like a detective, and get the characteristics of the noise written down and start to log it. So if you're seeing it regularly, every single day, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, yeah, neighbour's pool filter, that sort of stuff. Couple of quick examples. Watching the time.
Which one should we?
Let's start with going back to the top.
Yep. Okay. You're back to the top.
How to use QRM Guru. You can obviously come in and click on any of the links and just go and have a look. The first place, if you're really new to it, you can click Start here. It'll just take you in and give you a little bit of information about QRM.Guru, how it came about, how to use it. Clicking on the logo will always take you back to the home page. I could come into the process, and that just takes me through a natural progression, steps 1, 2 through step 8, of how to go about identifying and resolving noise. And clicking on any one of those would then take me into the relevant articles.
And they've got a bit of theory in there about whether it's conducted or radiated and things like that.
There's both written notes and videos. So let's have a look at one of those, which is the best one to start with.
Probably locating a noise source. How about that one? Number step. Oh, okay, that'll do. Has it got a video clip?
That one didn't have the video clip.
Just go back. Process.
Well,
Step 6.
Locating the noise source. So there's just a little bit of verbiage to set the scene, describe what part of the process you're in, links through to some templates. Now those are the same templates that we had in the template section. And I'm not going to... All of these are typically between 2 and 6 minutes. For these types of videos, rule of thumb, keep them between 2 and 6 or 7 minutes. We won't subject you to all of this, but just to give you a sense, Ian's put the bulk of these together. Have we got rid of it?
This video deals with many noise sources that affect Ammeter bands and describes some strategies for tracking them down. That's your old electric fence, up to 1 gigahertz. Coming from. One thing is for sure, you will pretty rich. Little assistance from electrical suppliers or telecommunications regulators, unless you can first provide a lot of information about the problem. While gathering this information, down just 2 distinct phases: gathering information and tracking down the source. So I'll get rid of bloody ads. There's lots of steps in here. As the video progresses, you want to find patterns in the noise, hints of where it's coming from, and there's some analysis. And this is very good at helping you to find out where it's coming from. And it is systematic.
It also goes out to some external websites giving examples of, I comfortably say, many dozens of noise sources. So if you're not sure what your noise is, you could go to that website, click on things until you find something that sounds similar, and that might help you to narrow it down. Once again, it's about that first step in the process of saying, how can I come up with some idea of the source of this noise?
How can generate noise. This noise may then stop after a good storm flushes away the dust. Pole transformers may begin to break down internally under heavy loads and hot days, which often occur at the same time. Anyway, that's an example.
Yep.
I'll hotkey you back to where we were.
Thank you. No, go back to...
Yep, okay. Back to where we were, which is here, and... Yeah. Can you scroll up from there?
I can scroll up from here.
You have the con.
I have the con. So there are probably about, 10 or 12 videos in the resource today. recently, I think we were at the EMDRC Handfest, and one of the guys came up and said, I've had horrible noise, I wasn't sure what it was. It was my neighbour's plasma TV. He wasn't interested in swapping it out. So the guy went and did some research and ended up buying one of these MFJ noise cancelling enhancers. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the technology and may or may not be familiar with the product. But for Craig, VK3 MET, the product worked, and it worked quite effectively. So he just got out his iPhone and he took a 4 or 5 minute video of the noise as it was without this noise canceller in line. He then very briefly explained the noise canceller.
You get
I'll just turn it down, sorry.
this, the TV sounds like next door. I think it's safe to say there's not going to be too much HF listening to that. At its worst.
I won't subject you to the whole video, you get the idea. Craig takes us through 3 or 4 minutes of using that noise canceller, showing the result, and it's a good reference. Alan also sent us in some videos of his experiences with power line noise, and he was one of the guys who started with the ACMA, got bounced off to the power company, bounced back to the ACMA, ended up going to the Ombudsman, and that's where he got the result. So these are the types of case studies that we want feedback on, successful and unsuccessful, so that they can be shared with other clubs, with other amateurs. And hopefully it'll help people reduce noise.
Probably, I'll just mention briefly some of the product reviews and then we can move on from there.
Oh, just one last thing beforehand. The other thing with that you can do with this is put my glasses on. I think I've got plasma TV noise. I start typing it in and straight away it goes to find searches for things with the word plasma. And there's those two, a reference to consumer electronics and to that video we just looked at. So a little bit of smarts in the back end.
MFJ generates the word plasma.
That's right. It's an article that covers off creating noise, yes. Equally so, I could have typed in power line noise. And there's quite a bit more there on documents that contain power line noise.
Well, if there's a way for noise to get out of the plasma TV, there's probably a way for countermeasures to get in too.
I beg your pardon?
If there's a way for noise to get out of the TV, there's probably a way for countermeasures to get in.
Yes. So look, I didn't want to necessarily go into solutions and in all the detail. I just wanted to demonstrate QRM.Guru. And Ian will talk very briefly about the product reviews.
That was something else that appears in here, if you can dig it up on the screen. I was concerned about the amount of products out there that generate noise. You go and buy something and you can see it's got the little stamps on the side, say FCC or CE and the various other approvals. Not worth a lot. Means nothing. And
CE means unenforced, doesn't it?
That's about it. And they're not recognised in Australia, frankly, even though they might be on there. But I wanted to anecdotally examine what is affecting amateur bands with a series of equipment. And I started this process of appliances, and I'm adding to it. I made a little test centre. You can see, looks like a microwave oven, which was a microwave oven, an old Philips one. And it was from the 70s, and I gutted it and put a PowerPoint in there and an antenna for the spectrum analyzer and a few other things. But anyway, it's a test chamber. It's got nice ferrites around the door. It's a good little box. And I've been putting different appliances in there, LED lights, various products, and profiling it not as a calibrated NATA lab test, but an anecdotal, is this good for amateurs or not? And each one is a single page document, like this one, or this one on a spotlight, and it profiles the impact on the amateur band. Well, I've lost what was on the screen, but there's a little graph to one side which shows the different amateur bands. There's a bar graph. These are the amateur bands it affects and a relative indicator of how much it does affect.
So we take that lamp.
Yep. And that was a good experience. I got some of the Philips supermarket lights and they were nice and quiet. And you can see on the bar graph down the bottom that So far as the Ammeter bands were concerned, it had no impact.
So there's an opportunity for you to sponsor these guys.
Other brands were noisy. So yes, I can say you can go to,
We have a form here for you to sign.
you can go to Coles. See,
What was a bad example?
Any good things
The J car?
Because they're paying for it.
The J car
The
spotlight.
J car. Whereas by contrast,
Yeah, I put a couple of these J car spotlights on my car, which were great, except that they wipe out 2 metres.
I had a crash cam that does that.
Yeah, HF was okay, but it was a nice big fat birdie, which from about 130 to about 140, 150 meg. And that's profile in here as well as another one. There's 50 watt LED lighting floodlights, which was for a car park, which wiped out everything up to about 15 meg.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that sort of thing. Anyway, I profile these things if I can fit them in my microwave, and I'm adding to it. And they're appearing as
a really big microwave.
yeah, the walk-in. Yeah, and I'm adding it as case studies. It's an interesting thing that I want to build on. So that if people once again want to know if they have a choice between going down a path on a particular product, maybe we can find a good testimonial.
Okay.
That's all.
Thanks. Right. So look, one of the other things that certainly for Ian and myself, putting together QRM Guru was a terrific learning exercise. It's been really interesting and it will continue to be interesting. And from that basis, we thought it's great for clubs. It's great for club projects. It's great for learning more about our hobby and the various aspects that impact it. And of course, the positive outcome of reducing noise. One of the things that came out of all this as we were doing it was, well, what sort of equipment do I need and where would I get it?
And what people do ask as well is something to be able to answer too.
Yeah, that's right.
Like who's willing to offer help in a given area?
Yeah. Well, this is where the clubs come in. Yeah. So we started sort of saying, well, what sort of equipment do you need to find the noise? And the most simplest thing is a wideband receiver and a DF loop. Do you want to talk very briefly about that? I'm aware of the time. Is everyone okay for another 10, 15 minutes?
I noticed there was a DF loop hung up in your shack there too, but probably the same type of thing. This is bog standard non-resonant loop, bit of a break in the coax there. These have been around for yonks, but that's all it takes to pick up a broadside null and a noise source, and you can use it to chase. It helps if you have an attenuator, but connect it to a little general purpose like receiver, like a little T90A or something like that, and you can work your way up the spectrum and get closer to those noise sources. So this was one ingredient that we felt is a useful starting point if you're going to start to look for sources of noise around the shack.
And there's a video on how to build one of those in QRM Guru. And then the other thing we sort of thought would be useful was to put together some sort of a kit. What are the basic ingredients without getting too carried away? And once again, wanting to have some sort of a name, a QRM Go kit or a Kill QRM kit. So predominantly Ian had the idea to put together a very simple bag which contained all the basics that would be required to undertake the process of identifying noise and resolving it. So it's got in it things like...
ferrite rings, lots of clamps, filter capacitors. There's a range of items. There's a description in the back of the kit of the parts. We're not selling them, but certainly in this case, this one is for your club. And we hope that you can get some benefit from it.
Yeah.
And
You make use of inline filters, plug and socket.
They're not in there, but there's on the website some examples of inline filters.
making use of a loop.
Yeah. And the idea was that if you've got noise, where do you start with all the different ferrite clamp-ons and coils and all that stuff? Well, here's a starting point. Play with them. If one works, use it, and then replace it. Put it back in the kit. If you want to add to the kit, go ahead and add to it. So we've put these together, and as a part of getting out and about, we'd like to leave one with your club and hope that you'll use it and perhaps make some club projects to get out and about
Basically the
and
ingredients.
resolve noise.
So there's a cross-section of here, and the idea is, yes, you can go to someone's place, take this on with you. Hopefully it'll help you to find it. You might have to use your phone to record the sounds or the camera and the phone to take pictures of things as well. But there's forms you can fill out, and if you use some of the parts, well, you can always replace them. They're all pretty much generic parts, but it's a starting point.
And there's a list of them so you can know what to replace them with.
There's a list so you know what to replace them with.
Yeah. Most importantly, as we've said we really think this is an interactive process. We want this to it's got a spec.
Here it is.
We want this to be an interactive process. So we want you to send back your experiences, your stories, be they anecdotal or documented experiences. Even after EMDRC 2 weeks ago, 2 of the guys built the loop the next day. One of them went and found noise in his own house and resolved it. The other guy went next door and found a noisy LED lamp in his neighbour's house, and his neighbour was quite happy to replace it. And his noise floor dropped. We've asked both those guys if they'd just send through a couple of paragraphs describing the experience and what the real world impact was on their S-meter.
Maybe we should get a testimony from the neighbour describing the
Well,
experience.
there you go, yeah. So certainly we want your stories, we want to hear about your experiences. If there's something you think could add value to this, because it's a resource for all the clubs to use, and it's a resource for everyone individually to use and contribute to. Special email address there to use, it's all on the website. There's a lot more information on the website, and as I've said, we really, it's not just we welcome your feedback, we want your feedback. Ian's already been through the QRM kill kit. There it is there, a bit of a photo of what's in there, and of course you can add to it yourself.
It's got a compass.
So we know where we're going.
That's it.
I was quite surprised to go and replace that stuff at JCar Electronics is about $200, isn't it?
Yeah, it worked out about that.
Yeah. All right. Any quick questions on QRM.Guru before we move to the final part of the presentation? No? Okie dokes. Sorry about the change in.
If we wanted to, say, look at adding some additional content to that, how do we go about it? Do we contact you guys?
Email that address.
So if we're going to get a PDF or something,
Email us. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And especially stories about solar inverters as well, all that stuff, because ultimately, you know, it's going to be helpful if we can have a knowledge base for people to go to.
Have you got an online form or something where someone can just add?
Don't have great experience with online forms. Email's better.
There's feedback at QRM.Guru is the email address specific for that task.
Apologies.
Just a question. One of the things I've found is there's a lot of inverter air conditioners that are also major offenders. The better brands tend to be okay, but certainly some of the Bunnings, no names, and those sort of things are definitely not. The other thing I'll add is if anyone's converting their 12-volt halogens to LED, if you've got the traditional iron transformer, there's no issue. If you've got electronic transformer, you're going to have to replace it. But the Philips LED drivers also at Bunnings are extremely quiet.
Yeah. If you could send us through those product details, Greg, we can add them to the list. I know Lee sent me through some LED lights he's using that are extremely quiet. I insisted when the electrician came and replaced all the lights at our place, I said, put one, come and look at my S-meter. Put one in, come and look at the S-meter, put the next one in, and now we've done the whole house. So that's another one that we'll be putting up on the website.
More on QRM.
What's causing a lot of noise for me, and that's the USB adapters in the car.
Yeah.
Those things just drive me nuts. Because the amount of noise,
Yeah, I mean, desk lamps. I've thrown 3 out, and I've found one from Bunnings that's lovely and quiet. It's one of those clamp-on ones with the little, the bendy and the little light at the end.
Yeah.
Lovely and quiet, no noise whatsoever. So now there's 2 of those in the house. The other stuff just gets chucked out. Right, moving along.
One of these ones. Yeah, the noisy suckers.
Excuse the change in format, it was late and I was struggling a bit. Right, those of us that are on HF and either are using digital modes or are active on sideband have probably noticed in recent years a clash or a conflict with particularly FT8 operators. Has anyone had experience with
7076?
Yeah, 7074.
7074.
1840 or thereabouts.
How do you mean a clash? You mean on frequencies?
Yeah.
It means they're actually using it.
Yeah. One of the things that we've been getting some feedback on was that as FT8 has come along in particular, it's clashing with our local band plan, particularly on 160 and 40. So late last year we went out, we once again just did a bit of a straw poll of amateurs, and the general feedback was this was a problem and it was time to do a band plan review. It was a very good collaborative exercise with the WIA. We went out there, we spoke to people, we had people both from our organisation and from the WIA who looked at the band plan, and we proposed two pretty simple changes to both 160 and 40, and those went through the respective technical committees of each organisation and were endorsed. So it was a good joint outcome. We certainly would like to see more communication, broadly speaking, out to the overall amateur community about those changes.
You got a spelling mistake in there.
Thanks.
Just let you know.
Yeah. I wasn't responsible for that slide. But look, this was a good example of collaboration. It was a good example of looking at an issue that has been outstanding for at least 12 to 18 months with the incredible popularity of FT8. And those of you that do hang out on those bands will have probably heard from time to time people having their sideband skeds and talking about that annoying noise that's underneath them, and if they press on they'll be able to get through with their sked. Rather than acknowledging that times have moved on, the usage of the bands has changed, and maybe it's time to address that in our band plan. One of the other things that happened, I think it was sort of middle of last year, a lot of people were saying, wouldn't it be great to have a single page band plan, just with everything on one page for the most commonly used HF bands, sort of 160 through 10. So we put this together. It's the Australian band plan. Both the WIA and RASA document the band plan. It's not owned by anyone per se, it is what it is. And this is just a very simple one-pager. I have to wear glasses now when I look at it. One of the things I do or going to do when I get home is look at blowing that up onto a larger, what is it, what's the next size?
A3 is
A3.
What about both sides of that?
Yeah, whatever that size is. And rescale it and see how it comes out. But grab one of those if you'd like afterwards. As you see, it's just a very simple diagram of the HF part of the spectrum overlaid with our VK band plan. In Australia, we're only regulated to the bands we can use based on our licence class. We're not regulated on how we use the modes inside the bands. And that's what the band plan is all about. Sharing the HF bands with harmony and recognising that there are other modes and other users that want to use those modes, so that hopefully we don't go around stomping on one another.
Is that PDF online too?
Yep, it's you can download it from the website. One of the things we thought would be a good idea was just to put that list of FT8 frequencies there. For those of us that don't use FT8, it's not sort of front and centre of our minds when we spin the dial.
Next one is kind of useful. Zoom in.
Yeah, but I'll just go back.
Oh, yeah. All right.
There are those spot frequencies. They're all in the new digital band plan. So if we steer clear of those frequencies for our sideband operations, we know we're not going to stomp on FT8 signals, especially because most of us aren't going to hear them. If we've got a high noise floor, S6, S7, FT8 signals might be down around S1, S2.
WIA broadcast at 1845 is a problem.
Sorry? And look,
It's only a guideline, Greg. Just a guideline.
Gentlemen's agreement. The other one that became obvious for us on Norfolk Island, I think we're the only country that has sideband on 30 metres. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's right.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep. And we've got that overlap. It's just off the page. We've got a little bit of an overlap with digital and sideband on 30 metres. So sort of coming back from that Norfolk Island operation, we thought we'd put that into the work schedule later this year to see what we could do to look at that particular part of the band plan on 30 metres. But there they are in detail, and that's up on our website. I think it is also up on the VK band plan on the WIA website. So there is that consistency there. We're all talking about the same band plan. And it was a very good example of collaboration, talking earlier about overlap between organisations, of how we can achieve these things together.
357 is a Foxhunt frequency. You got 357, 3.6 is digital.
Yep, that's right.
357 is a Foxhunt frequency.
You're sitting just below that.
You also
it's
got
right on
the WIA New South Wales broadcast.
Yep.
3590.
That's been raised, and it's in their schedule to get new crystals and move that further up the band. And that's actually an interesting point, isn't it? That there's that digital segment there from 3570 up to 3.6. Look, we've got 100 kilohertz above 3.6. Let's use it. There's plenty of real estate.
The reality is that we had no control in Australia of what those FT8 frequencies are, and the best that we can do in Australia is to try and map it so that we minimise the overlapping effects.
Yep.
I'm not arguing with you. I think you're absolutely right. I'm just saying it takes some education to change.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something where we'd encourage the WIA to do some more promotion of those new band allocations, because our footprint is out to about 600 plus or minus members, and a contact list of about another 100. And then obviously a little bit of Facebook and a little bit of people sharing the information further and wider. The WIA has obviously got a much larger footprint, both through the magazine, their email list, and their news broadcast, to be promoting some of these changes. It's for the common good. Right, the only other thing before the last section, another thing, just listening around both on Facebook and at clubs and emails, where people were saying, wouldn't it be nice to have one web page to go to just to get a common view of all of the special interest groups, particularly on HF, where I can go and find stuff. Because if you come to the hobby these days and you want to take an interest in something, where do you go looking for it? Whether it's SOTA, Worldwide Flora, Fauna, CW, Whisper, FT8, etc. We won't flick over to that website, but vkfrequencies.info, it's just got a list of all those frequencies. And we're happy to add more stuff to it.
7045.
We didn't want to go to the extent of club nets. More centres of interest, if you like. Right. On to something that came up again last year, particularly from the contesting community, was the concept of 2x1 call signs. Any of you who are contesters will have heard, ZL4 mic, or ZM4 mic rather, and the various other 2x1 call signs around the world. Some administrations have them as vanity call signs, others make them available for contesting purposes. Once again, we went out and did a bit of a straw poll, and there was sufficient interest in proceeding to look at the viability of 2x1 call signs. When we met with ACMA in December last year, they were quite open to the idea. They said, look, if the sector, they refer to us as a sector, if the sector supports it, we have no objection, come back with a proposal. So we pulled together a subcommittee earlier this year, and that subcommittee has been deliberating on the various issues around the concept of 2x1 call signs. The sort of things that the committee's looking at are, who could apply for one of these call signs? Is it for clubs only, or can individuals apply? What would be the eligibility? Yep.
What is a 2x1?
Sorry, VK2 alpha.
But like these ones up here.
2 in the prefix for VK and 1 in the suffix. So there's going to be 26 VK2 calls, 26 VK1 calls.
All right.
ABCD.
Instead of like 2-letter calls, it's a 1-letter call.
It's 1 call.
Okay. So at the moment we have VK2 Mike Tango. What if you want a VK2 Mike? Okay. So the idea was, what's the possibility of getting access to this call sign block? And if we get access to it, what are the eligibility requirements? Because certainly up and down the eastern seaboard, it's highly likely these would be very, very popular and demand would exceed supply. Whereas if I go to VK8, you probably find everyone that wants one could have one, and maybe 2 if they wanted. But clearly we need an objective selection criteria, an objective eligibility criteria. So is it clubs only, as I mentioned, individuals? What are the eligibility requirements? Do you have to illustrate that you're a hardcore contester, or can you get by illustrating you're an active contester who wants to get better?
Or is it temporary by ballot?
Beg your pardon?
Or is it temporary by ballot?
Or is it all of those sorts of things?
Or is it just using alpha X-ray instead of VK?
Oh, yep.
And then you have
The proposal here was the 2x1. So VKX alpha.
And the fundamental thing is that limit of 26.
Yeah.
In terms of
26 per state.
yeah.
Less those that have been allocated as scientific licences, of which, give or take, there's about 6 or 8. There's one in VK3, 1 or 2 in VK3, a couple in VK6. So, you know, what would be the policy that ACMA would put in place to quarantine those that are existing scientific licences and to quarantine the rest of them to say these are available for amateur use, special event contest call signs, as an example. So that subcommittee is working through those deliberations, and we're expecting a recommendation from them probably in the next 2 to 4 weeks. So that's something there.
So where you're talking about New Zealand users, that they don't use the ZL prefix, they use a Zulu mic prefix for those.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, they're not treading on their existing call sign prefixes.
Do they have ZLX one letter as a?
No.
No.
I think so.
It's Zulu mic.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they have a range of letters. So that's what I'm saying. You know, maybe you better be to use a different prefix like the alpha X-ray prefix.
Yeah.
So, and disperse with the state-based lettering.
Yeah, look, this is the scope that was discussed with the ACMA, and that's the scope that's been given to the
I
subcommittee.
was just recommending this based on the fact that that's what ZL use, right?
Yeah.
So,
And look, the committee's gone out and looked at the ZL experience and a couple of other international experiences, and also asked them for their feedback on how it's gone. Right. On to the last slide, and then we'll sort of open for any questions if there's any left. Our primary website is vkradioamateurs.org, and that's sort of our, if you like, our home page, and that describes who we are and what we do, how to join. There's some blogs there around spectrum management and regulation.
I was going to say RASA sounds like a telescope.
I'll get there in a moment. I'm just bringing up, where are we? I'll tab. That was it. And I had it up here. I'll just put it in directly.
And also how to join if you want to join. Members and people on our contact list get our bulletin, which is either fortnightly or monthly, depending on the news cycle, what's going on.
Yeah, there it is.
Information on ACMA lobbying, so you can get access to all of the proposals and the papers we've put to ACMA, as well as that one I mentioned earlier, our proposal regarding the 5-year spectrum outlook.
So this is really just our primary website for RASA, with lots of information about the organisation, latest news, and how the organisation is put together, and links for if you wanted to join and subscribe to the bulletin that we send out, and how to go about that.
Or if you want to send money.
Has anyone ever clicked the donate button?
Yeah.
Oh, you've had more luck than I did.
Yeah.
Oh, we've got a donate button.
We got
Look, our donate.
Yeah, you can click on ours.
Just flick back to the, the presentation.
I've got
Back to the-
very nice online impedance
There you go.
on the graph. Donate button.
So sort of wrapping up, as we've said, we're here to very much focused on the local VK situation. We don't have a relationship with the IARU, we're not looking at international matters, we're looking at local VK only matters. We've got a relationship with ACMA, we meet with them regularly and we communicate with them via telephone and email obviously. We've got that regular bulletin, either fortnightly or monthly, depending on what's going on. We've struck membership now at $8 a year. That's based on a fairly lean budget, being internet based. We don't need all that much money.
It's another typo.
Oh no.
Where? Interference.
Well, yeah.
He's a corporate type.
Oh, so you can pick the IT architect.
That was his.
That must have been some interference while I was typing.
There was some inference. I think it was an inference.
It was actually an inference. So look, if you want to join us, you're very welcome to, and we certainly appreciate the support.
Reading English.
We would strongly encourage and hope that you'll look at QRM.Guru and get involved with it, because this is something we feel really can benefit the amateur community at large. Other than that, thank you very much for inviting us to come along here this afternoon. And we have, I'll grab a picture.
Okay. All right. Want to present this to El Presidente.
Thank you.
Oh. Yeah, have some fun. It's the basis of what the club can do. It's a starting point, and I hope you get some use out of it. And it's to get the members of a club to think about it as a problem and to skill up on how to deal with it.
Thank you. So, are there any final questions that anybody wants to ask?
Yeah, look, I guess one, maybe more of a suggestion than a question, but in terms of QRM, I've got a bit of a focus on QRM. I'd suggest it might be useful having a library of different sound, different QRMs, in particular things like
we do have some.
Over the Horizon Radar, what Iona songs, because these are two of my
There
things.
is a signal identification wiki where you can listen to it almost
Yeah.
everything as well.
Yeah.
We took it up with the ACMA.
I took it up to the ACMA, and that got absolutely nowhere.
So but having it pointed to the signal identification wiki, which a lot of the scanner users are using.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Like sound.
Okay.
Just show the sound, they show the
Basic
waterfall.
diagram. No, not-
That's it.
Waterfall, yeah.
I think it.
Okay, forget that.
Forget that.
All right.
Righto, next question.
But anyway, there is a range of samples, sound samples on that website of various types of noise, LED lights, plasma TVs.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, there's a bunch on there.
Maybe the only other thing is we've got Greg here. We'd love the support of the WIA to promote QRM.Guru, because you've got a much larger footprint to get the good news out to. And I don't think it matters whether we're WIA members, RASA members, or impartial and couldn't care. This is a tool that we think could help everyone.
Yeah, what will be done?
I think most people don't know that I'm
If you've got some noises.
I'd be quite happy.
Signal identification wiki.
Link to QRM Guru.
Great.
You download the
Thank you.
RTF files and play them back.
Okay, that's very good. You snuck in. Well, guys, look, I'd really like to thank you for coming along.
Sorry, we went a bit over time.
No,
There's a
that's
lot of
all right.
material.
I think they're all awake, so you can see there's a lot of interest. Look, it was really interesting to understand what you're trying to do. I guess I'm just wondering, do you have any time for your day jobs doing that? I admire your energy and your enthusiasm.
It's a balance.
Yeah, and I think some of the things you're doing are going to really be helpful. And I guess my observation is what you're trying to do is not trying to compete with the WIA. You're trying to complement what they do. So there's a role for everybody.
Yep.
And it's collaborative, and if you can work together, that would be really good.
Congratulations on not saying anything negative about them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Impressed.
Oh, thank you.
So that's I don't know what the Vice President might think, but I think it sounds very positive. So thanks very much. And please stick around if you're not too tired, and talk to the members.
Please contribute to what you've seen. Like, if you do come across some nice noise sources, take a picture of it, record it with your phone, send it to us, it'll go there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.